Morena, my name's Jane, as you just heard, and I've been involved with the StrengthsFinder tool for probably over a decade now, and am quite passionate about it really as a tool. I'm part of the Strengths Network South Pacific, which affiliates with Gallup, who have developed this tool, and they have a number of coaches around the nation, including many based in Christchurch, which is really where the heartbeat of the Strengths Network is. And those coaches are the ones that are going to be meeting with you over the next couple of months and talking with you about your strengths. What I'm going to do today is kind of do an overview of the framework. Then we're going to hear from another Jane who was coached last year, and we're just going to share a little bit about her journey. And then I'll cover the process with you, just to make sure that we're all on the same page and we know exactly what we need to do and when we need to do it by and things like that. To start off with though, I'd like you guys to do a quick exercise for me. So I'm hoping you all have a pen and a piece of paper in front of you. What I'd like you to do is start off by signing your name like you would on any kind of official document. Sign your name 5 times. 5 times? Yep, most people are getting close to 5. Okay, once you've signed your name 5 times, what I would like you to do is swap hands. If you haven't quite done it 5 times, you're probably getting the gist. Okay, back in the room. We're coming back together now. Oh, see, beautiful. Wedding toast. Okay, I just want a couple of words to describe the difference between the first time you did it and the second time you did it. So we'll start with the first time, yeah? When this was your normal signing signature, when you think about how that felt for you and also the product and what the product looked like, can I just have a couple of words to describe that for me?
Automatic.
Automatic, wonderful.
Easy.
Automatic, easy.
Flow.
Flow. Consistent. Confident, those are good. That's enough? Okay, what about the second time? Let's talk about some words to describe that process. Messy.
Alien.
Alien, did somebody say? Yeah. That is such a good word. Alien. What else? Hesitant. And one more. Difficult. What's that? Infantile. Love it, love it, love it. Okay, we could add more words, and I'm not doing this process with you fully, but you guys have, that exercise is designed to kind of introduce us to this whole concept of operating from our strengths. Now, a lot of people will say the second time was also quite fun, and that is part of the exercise. We don't want it to be like this kind of boring thing, but actually when we're operating out of our strengths, these are the words that we start to associate it with it. It's automatic, it's easy, it flows, it's consistent, we're confident. Another word we'll often hear is it's natural, yeah? It's just the way we are. Whereas when we're operating out of our areas of weakness, and when we talk about weakness here, we're not talking about issues of character, so we're not talking about poor choices. We're talking kind of about the way you're sort of designed to be or made to be, the way you kind of are versus the way you're not. When we're operating out of that area of weakness, these are more the words we'll associate with it. Yeah, it's messy, it's alien, we're hesitant, it's infantile, it feels unnatural. It's just kind of not who we are. Now, of course, you can learn to write with your other hand. Yeah, that absolutely. People who have strokes are required to do so, and some people are ambidextrous. So it's not that it's impossible, but it's actually very difficult to ever get it to that place that's natural for you. My mum was one of those people who was left-handed, and when she was little that was wrong, that was evil, and so she was forced to write right-handed. She learned to write right-handed, but it felt kind of cruel because it wasn't who she was. She was forced into something that she wasn't. So the StrengthsFinder tool sits underneath this beautiful umbrella of the positive psychology movement. Halfway through last century, psychologists started to realise that actually there's this whole area they needed to investigate, and that was around what's right with people. Yeah, it's inevitable that as a discipline that you have to look at what's not working, because often people go to somebody in that discipline because things aren't working. But there's this whole area of what we call positive psychology that is opened up in the last several decades. And Gallup were part of this journey. So Gallup were involved several decades ago in a research project, and what they did is they took aside a whole group of children and they gave all the children intensive speed reading training. And what they were looking at is, based on the training these kids have received, what are their relative rates of improvement? Okay, so how much will these children improve? And they were particularly interested in comparing the students who weren't very good with reading to the students who were really good with reading, and what their different relative rates of improvement would be. So we'll look at the kind of the results. They started with the students who weren't particularly strong at reading. These are not the figures, but I use them because they're just easier mathematically. So let's say they can read 50 words a minute. They gave them this training, and at the end of it, those students improved 50%. So they could now read 75 words a minute. Probably not the... make it more proportional, which was really good, yeah? Nobody's going to say that a 50% improvement in reading is not a wonderful result for students in that kind of set of circumstances. However, they were particularly interested in comparing the students who were not very good at reading. Really good with reading. So let's say they can read 100 words a minute, and they were looking at how much will these students improve based on what's happened. And there were a variety of theories out there. So some people said, these guys improve 50%, these guys will improve 50%, which has a logic to it, yeah? Same kind of rate of improvement. Other people said, these guys are so good, they can't get any better. They're like maxed out in that situation. Does anybody want to guess how much improvement, somebody who hasn't heard me say this before, anybody want to guess how much the relative rate of improvement was for the students who were naturally strong at reading?
3 times.
3 times? How much? 2%? It's such a broad range of things. So a little bit of improvement, 3 times improvement. Anybody, any advances on that? 25%? Gallup were astounded. These students actually improved 800% in the number of words per minute they could read, which blew their minds. Now this was speed reading training, so they were learning to read speed reading. But what it did is it started to challenge what Gallup knew to be the commonly held perception in society. If you ask most people, how do you become a better person? Do you focus on your strength or do you focus on your weakness? Most people say your weakness. And of course they do opinion polls, so they know that most people actually think focus on your weakness. Now this research was suggesting you can put a lot of time and energy into focusing on your weakness and you'll see a little bit of improvement. You can put that same time and energy focusing in on your strengths and you'll see phenomenal improvement. Focus on your weakness and you become really independent, okay? So you can do everything. You might not be amazing at anything, but you can do everything. Whereas if you focus on your strength, you become really interdependent, so you need others around you who can complement what you're doing and you can work together and start to see more amazing results. And one of the things that we love about the Link project is the way that whole communities are kind of part of this journey with you, because there's opportunities to work together rather than have to be everything by yourself. So this research project got Gallup kind of thinking, gosh, if we move away from reading, which is a core life skill which we will always invest into, and they started to research what they called the innate talents in society. It actually would have been called StrengthsFinder, but that had been copyrighted, so they had to go with StrengthsFinder. So how they define a talent, and you guys will cover this in your coaching, but how they define a talent is it's a naturally occurring thought or pattern of behaviour that can be productively applied. Okay, so first of all, it's naturally occurring, yeah? You don't try to do this. There's people you'll know in your world that they're just really positive. And they don't wake up and think, today I'm going to be positive. It's just who they are, yeah? It's naturally occurring. It's a thought or it's a pattern of behaviour, so it's a way you think or a way you act, and it can be productively applied. It's not necessarily being productive at the moment, but it can be productively applied. So they did this research and they came up with well over 100 of these talents that they identified, which was way too many for a test. And so they grouped them together into the 34 different, what we call, themes. And when you do your test, you're going to be given your top 5 themes. So in each theme, you have a whole lot of different talents that make it up, yeah? But as I say, they grouped them together. Now, a theme is just a window into your greatest area of potential. You'll meet other people who have the same theme as you, and you're really different people. So the first part of our coaching journey is exploring, what does this theme look like for you? Yeah, if I'm your coach, I don't know you at all. Yeah, I know a lot about the themes, but you're the expert in you. So together we're exploring, what does this theme look like for you? Now, a theme is not necessarily a strength. For it to be a strength, it needs to be good for you and good for other people. And we don't go very far through life to discover people who have a particular theme, but it's not operating as a strength for them. I'm going to use 2 examples. I don't use these to pick on them. They're just really easy to understand. But all the themes are the same. Yeah, they're not necessarily strengths. So one of them would be the competition thing. Competition is an amazing thing. We call it the V8 of the themes because they're so driven. Yeah, people who are high in the competition theme are often very driven to compete, to win, and therefore very successful in all sorts of different areas of society. However, if you lack character and you have the competition theme, you can become very arrogant when you win, and you can tantrum when you lose. So it might be really good for you if you're winning lots, but it might not be so good for everybody else. So that's not a strength, okay? It's a theme, it's not a strength, okay? The reverse example would be the empathy thing. Again, incredible thing. Empathetic people sense what others are feeling often before the other person is fully aware of what they're feeling. So they're often, not always, very accepting and quite understanding. As a result, a lot of people often like to tell people high in empathy their problems. Now, if you have not developed the skills and the knowledge and the experience as to how to manage it when people tell you their crap, you end up carrying all their stuff, yeah? And so it becomes a really emotionally draining thing for some people. Now that's an example how it can be really great for everybody else, but not so great for you, okay? So that's not a strength, yeah? It's only a strength if it's good for you and good for other people. When we're talking about the StrengthsFinder tool, this diagram really does summarise the whole thing. You do this online test, and I'll explain more of that process to you. You get given your top 5 themes. We explore the theme. It might already be operating as a strength for you, but it's only a strength when we add character and skills, knowledge and experience to it. Yeah? Even if it is a strength for you, this is still your area of 800% potential. This is still your area of maximum growth and development as a person. And so that is what we start to explore as we go through the journey. One last piece to the puzzle, and then I'm going to ask Jane to come up and share a little bit about her journey individually. I've mentioned a couple of times you're going to do an online test, and as I said, I'll explain that to you. There's a gazillion of questions that you have to kind of click on and stuff like that. And at the end of it, the machine will give you back your top 5 things. Now, obviously, there are more than 5 things, okay? So there are actually 34 different themes in the StrengthsFinder tool. And you're only given your top 5, which is a relatively small piece of information given the whole picture. They're quite intentional about only giving you 5, because 5 is the best number for you to start to see how they work together. Yeah? You might have empathy, but with a focus, or with a command, or with a communication. What do they look like together? It is the combination of these results that make them so unique. So the chances of somebody else having the same top 5 as you is actually 1 out of 280,000. The same top 5 in the same order is 1 out of 33 million. It's that mathematical thing. It's 1 out of 34 times 1 out of 34 times 1 out of 34 times 1. It gets really, really big, really, really quick. Yeah. So it's the combination that's so unique. And they used to give 7, but people weren't working out how they affect each other. Yeah. You have one different to somebody else, and it looks really different. And of course, you're still more unique than even the test could tell you. So 5 is very intentional, but just so you know what sits underneath them. You actually operate in your top 10 to 12 all the time, every day. They're what are called your dominant themes. So when I did the test, I was not sold straight away, just putting it out there. I was sure it was wrong because I did not get empathy in my top 5. And like, you know those ads on TV? You know, like the telecom ads when the dog's lost or whatever? I just cry at the drop of a hat, you know? I was like, I know I have empathy and it's got to be wrong. And my coach said to me, it's probably your number 6, which just felt like not good enough for me. You know, I was like, I know it's there. And of course, I've now accessed my full 34, and I can explain how you do that later. And of course, empathy is sitting right here. Yeah. So if you get your results and they don't feel complete to you, be rest assured, chances are you're the expert in you. There's something sitting underneath there, and it does complete this picture. So they're your dominant things. Down the bottom, these are the ones we call your non-patterns. Non-patterns are things you can put a lot of time and energy into, and you're just not going to see a whole lot of change. So for me down here, I have the theme of adaptability. Highly adaptable people are usually very in the moment, and they're able to go with change. Yeah. When I've really invested into a plan, the change just annoys me. Yeah, because at that moment, I cannot see how this change could possibly be better than what I planned. Yeah, so I get really irritated in that space. Adaptable people will often say to me, well, there's your problem, you invested into the plan in the first place. So here's my challenge. I could work really hard to be more adaptable, to somehow suppress this part of me that's annoyed at this change. But the reality is, I kind of know I can't really change that. In fact, the only way I can see to change that would be not to invest in the plan in the first place, but then you're not getting my strengths. Yeah, because actually I make jolly good plans. Yeah, that's the way I'm wired, that this plan is actually a thing of beauty, if I do say so myself. So I'm sitting here and I'm going, I kind of know I can't really change that, and it's not really me, but I have to adapt. Everybody has to adapt. You can't go through life not changing, because that's part of life. And so, what the StrengthsFinder tool tells us is not that we can or can't adapt, it's all about how we do something. Your character says, I have to look at how I change. So I have to manage my lack of adaptability. And there's 2 key strategies. The first is I leverage, and the second is I borrow. Now, leverage means I use what I do have to help with what I don't. My number 1 theme is strategic. I strategize about how I will adapt, which is not adaptable at all. And adaptable people are like, that just sounds really exhausting. You strategize about how you adapt. But what they don't realise is strategy is easy for me. It's intuitive. I don't even think about it. I don't have full-on strategic plans for every possible change that could happen in the world, but I do mentally prepare myself strategically for change. Yeah, StrengthsFinder does not tell me I cannot adapt. Yeah, that's just not true. What it does do is it says I'm not naturally adaptable, so work with yourself the way you are wired rather than trying to make yourself something you're not. Yeah, so we leverage. The second thing we do is borrow. When I form teams, I do intentionally look for highly adaptable people who can bring that into the mix so that we can support one another and journey together on that. So there are non-patterns. In the middle, we have these things called supportive themes. These are ones that you can do, but they'll often be draining for you. For me, in the middle, I have the theme called woo. Woo stands for winning others over. Generally, a high woo person walks into a room full of people they don't know, and they're like, yes. I walk into a room full of people I don't know, and I'm like, no, and hiding in the corner, and let me find one person I know. So that I can talk to them. So I can woo, I have to woo, yeah? I connect with people socially a lot in the work that I do, but I'm exhausted by it. My husband's high in woo, and he's fully energised in that space. The higher you up are with a supportive theme, the more likely you are to use them, and the lower down they are, the less likely you are to use them. Sometimes when we're explaining these 3 distinctions, we talk about shoes, like the analogy. Your dominant themes are like your favourite shoes. They look great, they feel great, they're comfortable, you wear them a lot, they're just great shoes, yeah? Your supportive themes are the shoes you have for a special occasion. So they might be that fabulous pair of high heels that you wear to a wedding because they look great, or at least lots of you in the room would wear to a wedding because they look great. But you kick them off halfway through because they're really uncomfortable, but you still love them because they have their purpose. Or maybe they're like your tramping boots, yeah? You wear them for a tramp, but you don't wear them to the gym every day. So they've got a special focus for you. Whereas your non-patterns are the shoes you got because you thought they were a bargain, they're on sale, they're not your colour, they don't fit you, they're uncomfortable, and you're just like, man, I should just give them away because they look great on that person, they're just not me. So it's a small little anecdote, metaphor, but it kind of explains the difference between our dominant, supportive, and non-patterns. that's an overview of the framework. I'm going to go through the process with you in a second as to exactly sort of how you do your codes and get online and all that kind of stuff. As I said before, what you will get through this process is just these top 5, but most people find it really helpful to have a wider understanding of the framework before they get these top 5 results. What I'm going to do is invite Jane to come up and share a bit of her journey, and we hopefully have a bit of time for questions at the end.
Okay, thanks, Jane. Jane's and Chris's, eh? Jane's and Chris's everywhere. Okay, so I went through Link last year, and StrengthsFinder was one of the most beneficial parts of doing the Link program, and for me personally, and in lots of ways that was because it did what various parts of Link did, which was nourish and nurture me. And I borrowed the nourish word from Lee from talking yesterday, but it really did. So I had an hour's training, my first session with coaching, and I remember walking down the stairs and going, wow, that was an hour that was all about me. And how often when you're busy and you're giving lots out to your communities do you get that kind of one-on-one lovely stuff back? So that was part of what was fantastic about StrengthsFinder, was just to have that time to really be able to reflect and think about myself. In terms of the information that came through StrengthsFinder, I think in lots of ways it tells you stuff you already know. You know, we know what we're good at, we know what our strengths are. But what it did do was there were 5 things and how they all interacted, but also kind of reframed it in terms of me thinking about, and because I'm a strategic thinker, that came through, the best possible way to be able to kind of use that. And as Jane was saying, the need to have other people and how to work with other people based on that knowledge that I had. So it was incredibly helpful and set off lots and lots of reflecting. And of course I just do this all the time now, and of course because I also had intellection, and that's where you process and process and process. And I also gathered up lots of information because I have input. And I have learner, which means I want to get that information out to other people. You know, it made sense to me once I got these top 5 strengths, how I operate as a person and how I best operate and how I can best contribute. And also, which was fantastic. When I first saw them, this input, learner, strategy, intellection, and then I had relator. One people one, but it just sounded like I sat in a room on the computer all day, you know. But in actual fact, once I had the coaching and I understood how these things all work together, and then how I put that stuff back out, it was like, oh, okay, that, yeah, because I'm a doer, and it just was weird. But once I understood it, it really, really helped. The other thing it did was identify where gaps are, which is so important. So there was actually someone else on Link who was involved in setting up the Te Waka Araha, the organisation I'm working for. So she did hers as well, and then we actually got some funding for Leslie, who's here this year, to be able to do it. So the organisation paid for her to be able to do it. So the 3 of us could sit down and have a coaching session, and that was amazing. And then all the things that you know work well just kind of fall into place, but you know where those gaps are. And then you can, as you were saying, actively look for people and encourage people to get involved in things because they're strengths that you don't have. So, you know, it worked in a real multiple set of ways, I guess. And what's happening now is that I work with what I do best. And what it means is that I am not superwoman anymore. I'm not running around trying to do everything. I'm not exhausted all the time. You know, we work in complementary ways, and it means my energy can go into the stuff that I do best. And it energises you, you know, because it's exciting and it's easy, it's natural, it flows, all of those words that you were talking about with your handwriting thing. So yeah, I just found it incredibly beneficial, but I think one of the keys is to have a really open mind about how you can use this new knowledge, or this confirmation of knowledge you already have about yourself, to be able to do things really differently and imagine really different ways of being able to do it. So yeah, it was a really interesting part of this whole fabulous journey that Link is.
I really enjoyed listening to that. It's just so nice, you know. It's really affirming for the people who have been coaches to hear some of that journey and some of that feedback. Thank you. One of the things that Jane picked up on that's quite common, Gallup had this little diagram that sounds a little bit churchy for some of you who are involved in churches. It's not at all churchy, it's totally just Gallup. They talk about name it, claim it, and aim it. When you do the test, you just literally name it, yeah? You might like your results. My husband did the test, he loved all his straight away. Yeah, when I did the test, I only liked 2 of them. I didn't actually think one of them was a strength at all. And one I was just like, well, that sucks. I just had a really varied response to personally to what I did. And they were just names. And I've done a lot of those tests. I've done the Enneagram and the Myers-Briggs, and actually quite like all of them, so please don't hear that as a dismissive thing, but actually the first stage of just doing the test, it literally is just naming it. When you go to coaching is often where you start to claim it, you start to go, oh, I do see that, it isn't as stuck in a room as Jane sort of said, I see how I do that, and so you start to really own that. Aiming it often happens in the context of relationships. So the aim it stage will often happen where you're part of a team or part of the groups that you're here with link, and you're starting to debrief or process things using the StrengthsFinder language. Otherwise, there's that potential that it's just one of those things you did 10 years ago and what were my top 5 again, The aiming it often happens, spouses or partners will both do the test and it becomes a common language for them to use. It usually happens in the context of relationship, and it happens when you're working, you're wanting to see something happen, and you can see with the triangle we're kind of moving forward now. So obviously when you do the online assessment, if it doesn't resonate that strongly, don't worry about it, But I encourage you to get to the coaching because absolutely claiming it and starting to own it becomes really important for it to be effective. Okay, I'm not pausing, so apologies, but we'll go through the process and then we'll take the test. Now I'll just move this back again so people can see. Okay. So this is the only slide, and I've put the dates up in case people wanted to write them down. So on the 16th of February, you will receive an email from the Strengths Network office with a code. Now, if you have done the StrengthsFinder assessment before, we would strongly encourage you to not use that code, okay? The first time you do the test, they would say is the most accurate. There was one lady overseas who didn't like her results, so she kept doing it until she got the results she liked. She did it 10 times, okay? And finally got there. The first time you do it, you have no preconceived ideas about any of the themes. As soon as you do it, particularly if you've been coached, if you do it after being coached, you're now starting to affect your results. So encourage you to use your first lot of results. Having said that, as I said to you guys, I didn't like my results, so I've done it 3 times. And that was part of my journey, so there's absolutely no pressure. But in the only timescale it would say that it is not the most accurate the first time you do it would be if you were clinically depressed at the time you did the assessment the first time. Obviously your brain chemistry changes in that set of situations. The other time, sometimes people do it very young when your brain is still developing. Some people in late high school will do the assessment, and they would recommend if you're now in your mid-20s, where obviously your brain is hopefully fully developed. Then that would be another time we'd say you could look at doing it again. Now, you then have 3 days. Now, this is quite intentional. 3 days in which you need to complete your online assessment. The reason we've given you 3 days is if we give you 2 weeks, you'll just put it off for like a week and a half, and then you'll still have the pressure to do it at the end. So we're wanting to keep the momentum going. So 3 days to do the online assessment. All the instructions are there. You do need to put aside 40 minutes of uninterrupted time. Be aware though that if you get through and the house is about to burn down or whatever and you're only halfway through the test, if you log out, you can log back in. It will take you exactly back to where you were when you did it. So, but you do want to have uninterrupted time. Now, the other thing to be aware of is when you do it, there's 2 questions or 2 statements at either end, and you've got 5 little buttons you can click. So it's from strongly agree with this statement, strongly agree with this statement, and you've got agree, and you've got neutral in the middle. You're allowed to click neutral, there's no problems with that. If you click neutral too many times, and it has to be quite a lot of times, it will start to affect your results. So we encourage you, if you're slightly more one than the other, or slightly less one than the other, try to lean into those. But absolutely, if you just cannot choose between the 2, that is absolutely fine. Some people what the test does, is designed to do, is if you go neutral, it's very good at working out, are you going neutral because you so agree with both of them you couldn't possibly choose? Or are you going neutral because you so disagree with both of them you couldn't possibly choose? The test can work that out, yeah, based on what other questions you've answered. So give yourself a good 40 minutes just go for that. Then what we'd like you to do is print what's called your signature theme report. There's quite a few reports that come through. You're welcome to read all of them, absorb as much information as you like, but the one that's headed up signature theme report is the one that we need you to print out. And before your coach, you need to highlight any parts of that resonate with you, that you go, yeah, this really feels like me. And also highlight any parts of it that you think, no, that just isn't me at all. Okay, so back to this theme window. Yeah, the highlighting is kind of our start point to look at what does this theme look like for you. Yeah, the highlight is our start process. Now, by the 26th of February, your coach will have contacted you and they will make a time with you for the coaching. And I've put 1.5, it should say 1.5 hours. Yeah, it's 1.5 hours you need to put aside for that time. And as Jane beautifully said, it is fully about you. By the 18th of March, so you can see the time frame there, that coaching session needs to have been completed. And it's just negotiated between you and the coach, as well as venue, location, those types of things you'll negotiate with your coach. By the 30th of April, you're going to have completed a 1-hour follow-up coaching session. So you get 2 sessions. One is just your basic intro coach. The second is a follow-up session, which is actually able to be customised a bit for you, depending on what is really happening for you in your world. I know that when I did my follow-up sessions, we got quite creative, and the coach and you can work out what the best next step is for you in that journey. So theoretically, by the 30th of April, you will have had 2 coaching sessions, you'll know your top 5, and you'll be ready to change the world. That's the theory. We'll see how it goes. Can I take any questions? This can be related to any part of what we're doing. Yep.
Who are the coaches?
I can tell you...
Well, I don't need names, just...
No, I'm the only coach in here. So all the coaches have been trained through the Strengths Network, which, as I say, is affiliated with Gallup. To be a top 5 coach, you have to pay lots of money, and you need to do a intensive, basically like what you guys are doing, this kind of intensive learning with pre-learning and post-learning and all that kind of stuff. So they're all accredited Strengths Network coaches. Good question. Yep.
Do we find out what our norm patterns are?
Good question as well. Okay, so basically the way to access this information is to pay more money. Okay, so the top 5 is what, through the LET project, you have access to a top 5 code. You'll design your own username and password. If you want and desire to access the information that's underneath, you log back in using the same username and password and you pay a little bit more money. It used to be hideously expensive when it first came out, as in $500 US, which you just go, well, I wanted to know, but not that much. But now it's the difference between a top 5 and it's like $70 or something like that. I can't give the exact figure. They've recently changed the top 5 amount, so I haven't quite got them in my head. But it's relatively affordable in comparison. What we would recommend though, if you are accessing this, first of all, we recommend you sit with just your top 5 for at least 3 months. Yeah, they used to, at one stage, they just gave everybody everything. And of course, what did everybody do? They looked at the top 2, and then they went right down here and they started to try to fix what was down here. Yeah, so we encourage you to sit in your top 5 for at least 3 months so that you've really got this whole concept of strengths, and then start to access the information underneath. And then, I mean, to be honest, I just laughed when I saw mine, which doesn't mean they weren't important to me, but it was quite an affirming process rather than something that immediately took me into a deficit way of approaching things. The other thing we'd encourage you to do if you get your full 34 is look at accessing full 34 coaching, and you can find, not all top 5 coaches are trained as full 34 coaches, but you can access that information off the website. And there's 2 sessions we tend to do around full 34, and they give you really good insight into how they operate. Any other questions? Yep.
You said you did 3 assessments. Why the
Are you happy with that? Is that where you got the 34?
That's a great question. So every time I did it, my top 4 have never changed. Okay, so every time those didn't change. So I've always had strategic belief. So what I believe in act has to be consistent. Maximizers, love what's good, want it to be great. And relator, which obviously Jane had as well, which is the relationship one. Hallelujah. The 5th one, the first time I did it, was responsibility. And I just thought, well, that sucks. Shouldn't say that to you guys, but it really did. It felt like a bit of a burden at the time. It's like everybody wants to work with somebody high in responsibility, but I always get left with the stuff to do. You know, that's how it felt for me. The second time I did it, I bumped responsibility, which was incredibly empowering for me because I was like, oh, this thing doesn't control me, I control it. And it actually was the start of my journey to discover, oh my goodness, you know, what does responsibility look like as a strength? And then I started to realise, actually, it would devastate me if people thought I wasn't trustworthy, reliable, that my word was my word. Like, actually, there's something quite core in who I am. That's essential to who I am. And then I started to explore, the times responsibility feels really awful for me is when I'm carrying things I shouldn't. Yeah, I've said yes when I should have said no. And then the StrengthsFinder became the tool that I'd use to empower me to look at, well, okay, what am I going to carry? Because I want my responsibility to be this amazing thing. I don't want it to be this horrible burden that I just think, well, that sucks. And the only way to turn it off is to have a glass of wine. So yeah, that was my journey. 3rd time round, I actually scored and I got empathy as my 5th one. And that felt quite good too, because I knew it was there. So yeah, that happened for me. Not everybody finds that it's for, I think they've done the retest correlation, which the psychological experts will know more about. And generally, if you do the test a second time and you're doing it honestly with yourself, you should see 3 or 4 of the same. What they say will happen is these will rearrange a little, and that's exactly what happened for me and as I redid the tests. But you're not likely to see, well, you shouldn't see, if Gallup's thing is true, stuff down here magically coming up to here. Okay, so that's usually what happens. Any other questions? Yep.
Yes, is there an explanation of what each word means? I mean, you say maximising.
Yeah.
What exactly does that mean?
Yeah.
Great question. Yeah. So when you print out your signature theme report, that is the base description. Some of the themes have titles that actually don't make a whole lot of sense. So intellection is one. People see the theme intellection, they think it means they're intellectual. And if you haven't done well at school, you're like, well, that's not me, you know, like, and they can immediately not. Or strategic is another one. They think that means strategic planning, yeah. And if you're not really a strategic planning kind of person, you're like, oh, that doesn't work for me. So there's a number of things that you really do need to see that base description. And then in coaching, we explore it more. Yes. Yep.
Jane, was there any correlation between what came up in StrengthsFinder and other psych tests that you've done, like Myers-Briggs, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. They complement each other beautifully, and there's also a resource somewhere in my big pool of resources, but I could certainly email it to Anna, which is a bit of a how do Myers-Briggs and StrengthsFinder fit together. For me, one of the things that really helped me with is I'm an introvert in the Myers-Briggs thing, and I always kind of didn't quite get the introvert thing. I'm quite borderline, i.e. But coming out with the relator made a lot of sense to me. Yeah, I'm not the extroverted kind of woo type person, but actually put me with people I know and I'm highly energised and I come alive. And so what I found is the StrengthsFinder added insight and depth to my understanding of the other tools that I've used. So that was my experience. But would you be interested if I got you that little tool? I'll email it to you, Anna. Cool. Okay, we're at 10 o'clock, which is our finish time, but if there is any other questions just sitting with people, I'm happy to take one more. Yep.
So if we had our whole workplace to do this, how would that look as a group coaching session?
Great. So to do a team coach, you need each person to have been individually coached. Because otherwise they don't really understand themselves, and what people can do if you're not careful is they can, instead of using the StrengthsFinder as a tool, and that's all it is a tool, to better understand difference in another person, they start to make all these assumptions and start labelling people and things like that. So the individual coach is the first process, and that's the most time consuming, because if you've got a a workplace of say 10 lots of 1.5 hour coaches, and the cost associated with that's significant, but in my opinion an investment that's worth it. Then you have a team coach where all those people come together and we negotiate what that looks like, but usually the two key stages, first of all, is who are we? So let's just kind of share with each other around, here's our results, this is what it looks like. And the second phase is kind of around, okay, how do we work together? Yeah, how do we take the best of what each person is? We've got a few tools that we use to kind of help with that, looking at categorising some of the themes so that we can start to partner better. We tend to look at what's a goal or something you want to achieve, and then instead of just doing a straight old strategic planning that most of you will do quite well in this room, we're looking at how does each person's themes contribute to achieving that. So that's kind of where we'd go with a team coach. Similarly, as I said with Full 34, not all top 5 coaches have become team coaches. So the website has some information about who's trained as a team coach and who's trained as a Full 34 coach. There's a couple of people in this room I know who've done team coaching for their organisation. So you guys, if you have, can you put up your hands? Yep. So look at them, and if you're interested in team coach, have a chat to them about kind of what was good, what wasn't good. Hopefully it was mainly good. And in the break that could be helpful. Okay, I need to wrap up, don't I? So do you want to finish?
Thanks, Jane. That's fantastic. Excellent. All right, so just a couple of things to add to that from me, really. If you've done StrengthsFinder already, Jane's talked a little bit about that. It's vaguely possible, although unlikely, that somebody here has done StrengthsFinder 3 times already, and they know their strengths off the top of their head, and they're using them daily and thinking about them. If that's you, and you think, gosh, this is really not necessary for me to do this again, just come and let me know, and we'll do something about that. The other thing is that all of the StrengthsFinder coaches, we've asked them to come to the additive on the 9th of March, and if they can't make that one, they'll come to a later one. But that's so that they get a bit of a feel of the whole Link project, and they understand the context and how this thing fits together. So you will have met your coach by then, almost certainly, because it's gone. But you'll need to have done the first coaching by the 18th of March, so you're all almost bound to have met your coach already and had that coaching by the 9th. But if not, you'll meet them there anyway as well. And all the other coaches. So you're going to get that email tonight or tomorrow morning is when it's going to come out. So you'll get that email with the code in, it'll outline this process and the dates as well, and it will also send you the entire list of the all of our names and the coaches, so the matching list, who's got which coach. All right, so you'll know who's having the same coach as you and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, that's how that's going to work. As you know, all of this, actually this is true for the whole of the Link project, it's all covered by hard-won funding from a range, as you know, a range of funders have pulled together, which is actually quite an amazing thing in itself, to fund this project. So that includes the 3 councils, Christchurch City, Waimak and Selwyn, Sarah, Wayne Francis Trust, Tyndall Trust, Red Cross, MSD, etc., have all put together. So this funding has been hard won and pulled together in this, and part of that is being used to pay for StrengthsFinder. So it does cost, and it's being used to pay the StrengthsFinder organisation to do this coaching. So we just want to say, please don't squander that. So obviously if you need to reschedule because you're having a baby or whatever. Turns up, you have to reschedule your session, that's fine. Please contact your coach and we can do that. If you don't show up, it's a bit like if you book a flight and pay for it and you don't show up, Air New Zealand don't give you that flight back. It's like, sorry, you paid for it, that's that. So if you don't show up, you won't get that session again. But obviously if you need to reschedule, we are reasonable, of course. But please just communicate with your coach. They're going to be expecting to, they're carving out time in their schedule and booking it in and showing up and everything. So please just liaise with your coach. They're going to be in touch with you anyway. Yes, that's it. That's great. So looking forward to working through that process with you. It's a good thing. It's a very good thing. We found it immensely useful in last year's program. Great. Thank you very much, Jane. Jane's been out of line. Thanks.